solved. Dear colleagues and friends, dear students, we're happy to see you here. So today's open session, as well as the two other, which will follow today and tomorrow, the one on European identity and the other on heritage in contemporary Europe. All these sessions are organized in the framework of the activities of Hub 2, which is coordinated by Athens and Tübingen together. Thank you. By Athens and Tübingen. So I would like to thank very much Dora Antonopoulou, Professor Dora Antonopoulou, who is the coordinator on our part, on the part of the National Capodistria University of Athens, as well as Dorothy Kimish, which coordinates on the part of the University of Tübingen.
You know exactly.
The term Hub 2, which I mentioned, is not perhaps familiar to all the members of our audience here or online. So please allow me to briefly explain what it is. What do we mean by this? CIVIS hubs are interdisciplinary thematic education and research areas around which all educational activities are structured so far. This means that the hubs are at the core of CIVIS strategy. We have 5 hubs from the beginning. 5 hubs have been defined. And I will mention them. Climate, I will mention in the order they started being developed in CIVIS. Climate, environment, and energy, this was the first. Society, culture, heritage, the second. This is the one NKUA together with Tübingen is coordinating. The third is health. The fourth, cities, territories, and mobilities. And the fifth, which now will develop, is digital and technological transformation. I don't need probably to say more on this, so let's come to the subject of our session here, societies in a period of pandemic and fake news. We have with us 4 distinguished speakers, professors from different universities of CIVIS. I will mention their names in the order they appear on the program. Professor Gabriele Alex from...
She's not here today. I'm filling in for her.
Sorry?
She's not here today. I'm filling in for her. So she couldn't
So
make it. Due to health reasons.
Okay, Maximilian Priester Lass. Sorry for that. They didn't give me the information.
No problem.
Okay, it is a problem, but anyway, thank you, thanks. The Associate Professor Sorin Kostege, University of Bucharest, Professor George Plios from our university, University of Athens, National Capodistria University of Athens, and Associate Professor Manuel Alcartaro. Our societies the previous years have severely suffered from the COVID pandemic at various levels. And I don't need to expand on this. It's a recent and intense experience all of us had. At the same time, the problem of fake news seems to get bigger and causes a suffering at the first glance of a different type to our societies. How much pandemic has affected our societies? How much is fake news influencing our lives? Is fake news harmful? Are these two sub-themes of our session related to each other or not? And so on. Our speakers will deal with these and similar questions. And at the end, there will be time, despite our delay at the beginning, there will be time for the audience to ask their questions. So, let's give the floor to our first speaker, Professor Maximiliano. His subject is?
The subject is individual and public health in the COVID-19 pandemic, negotiations and freedom of solidarity. Is the audio okay? Yes. Okay, perfect. So thank you very much, Professor, for the very warm introduction, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to my talk today. As I already said, I'm filling in today for the project leader, Professor Gabriele Alex, who unfortunately couldn't make it to Athens today due to health reasons. First, I have to say that I'm presenting an ongoing project, so please don't expect any final results. And second, I am actually not involved in the project, but I'm trying to present it in an appropriate way. So the project is part of the Collaborative Research Center 1070 Resource Cultures at the University of Tübingen in Germany. In a nutshell, the research project focuses on the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on knowledge production and power relations. For this, 2 PhD students are conducting qualitative anthropological research in Berlin, Germany, and Pudukkottai, which is a small town in the state of Tamil Nadu in South India, over the time span of 4 years. The current COVID-19 pandemic was chosen as the object of study because of its explosiveness and passiveness. Like no other pandemic or epidemic before it, COVID-19 has produced a concerted health policy with interventions in public and private life at local, national, and global levels. Epidemics tend to reinforce existing social, economic, or communicative inequalities by creating unequal access to essential care structures. Processes of stigmatization and marginalization of already disadvantaged population groups can be observed. The search of culprits or triggers of epidemics, described as geographies of blame, leads to social conflicts in addition to the damage to health. To examine these effects, the project focuses on 3 research strands. This is the one. First, space and materiality. Second, networks and relationships. And third, knowledge formations and coping strategies. The first strand aims at an understanding of the spatial rearrangements and the technological contours and material forms of pandemic control. What new spatial orders emerge, what materialities are used, and how do these materialities, for example, face masks, interact with space? Or in other words, how do new orders of public and private space take place based on the COVID-19 measures? Are there extensions of the epidemic space because human bodies are exposed to risk and at the same time pose risk to others? How are materialities integrated into existing orders when, for example, statues of the gods in Hinduism are given the same caring treatment as humans by being examined for COVID-19 and having masks tied around them? What negotiations of space between individuals, collectives, but also between state and society take place in the context of the pandemic? The second strand of research asks what networks and relationships, for example, in the form of dependencies, solidarity or established exchange relationships emerge, and how these are associated with collective and individual health. What do the necessary care structures look like? What is exchanged? What are the expectations of donors and recipients, and by whom were they enacted? How and by whom are health and care demanded, and what role do the factors of risk and vulnerability play in this, and how is care exercised? The third research strand focuses on explanatory models and knowledge formations and the coping strategy that grow out of them. The project investigates how knowledge is constructed in the interplay of practical competencies, for example, hygiene routines, and which represent a kind of intuitive knowledge and intellectual operations. The question arises as to how concepts of health are formed in the process of explaining the pandemic. How is what is experienced explained and made comprehensive? Which religious, for example, Hinduistic, Islamic, or Christian explanatory concepts, folkloristic, cosmological, and medical explanations are used? How are the measures associated with political concepts and ideologies? Is there mistrust or a sense of conspiracy or staging, and how is knowledge constructed or also doubted in this context, and what power relations are built up or suspected, for example, among so-called corona deniers in Germany? Next slide, please. Descriptions and analysis of the side effects of COVID-19 play a major role in the debates. This means the consequences on life and limb that are not caused by the virus, but by the response to the pandemic and the resulting changes in living and working conditions, infrastructure, leading to suffering, precarity, disease, and even death. For example, it is discussed how travel restrictions, quarantines, and lockdowns affect the economic system and existing social inequalities in terms of access to the healthcare system becoming reinforced and visible, and how the developing disaster capitalism fosters absolutist power structures. Next slide, please. Another approach asks how pre-existing inequalities and structural violence impede access to water, food, shelter, sanitation, or health facilities, and what influence the socioeconomic status of individuals has on the spread of the pandemic and the treatment of the disease. For the South Indian case, COVID-19 measurements, especially the lockdown, have increased the precarity and fragility of existing dynamics. For the poorest, the collateral provided by the state is not enough. So intra-caste or kinship solidarity is activated. At the same time, impoverishment and indebtedness increased, and there's a return to old forms of dependency, for example, between Dalits, so formerly known as untouchables or outcasts, and former feudal lords. The narrative and coping strategies accompanying COVID-19 are oriented towards the different forms of medical and religious knowledge. The entire repertoire of medical knowledge, for example, established medical explanatory models such as biomedicine, Siddha medicine, astrology, Unani, homeopathy, as well as local explanatory models fed by religious, cosmological, or traditional knowledge, was used to give meaning to the pandemic and to remain capable of action. In this context, it became clear that the experience of epidemics, especially smallpox or leprosy, is anchored in collective memory through myths, folklore, and religious practice. Among other things, it finds expression in the Hindu deity called Mariamma, the goddess of smallpox, who is the central divine Hindu instance in health-seeking behavior. Another aspect is the question of state-based control and how digital surveillance, legitimized by the state of emergency, transform public space into a monitored space, which provides authoritarian regimes with new means of surveillance and domination, and thus new spatial and political structures. Next slide, please. COVID-19 has also shown how quickly people adapt to new hygiene routines and abandon familiar routines for the protection of the collective and develop new social networks to help those who are vulnerable in the crisis or dependent on social help. The rediscovery of sociality and of being interdependent counters the overpowering sovereignty of the state. Building on this, the current crisis opens new horizons of thought in mainstream consciousness. What constitutes a good life? What things and relationships are important? What can be done without, and what alternative, more just forms of economy and life would be conceivable as being renegotiated? In the midst of the dystopia discourse, utopias and hopes emerge that are projected on the time after the standstill and quarantine. Because of COVID-19 is able to reorder social structures in the general, then there's also hope that the relationship between humans and between society and nature can change for the better. It implies the hypothesis guiding the research, which is, in the context of the pandemic, different resources are redefined and interpreted and negotiated, and hierarchized between individuals, collectives, and state authorities. This is visible in the changing and moving resource structures. The associated practices and exchange relations can lead to new we forms, which means that people regroup with or organize against each other. They become we that emerges situationally and contextually and contribute to the self-understanding of the individual. Next slide, please. So the results of the research so far are that spatial orders change through hygiene and public health policies. In the South Indian case, that means that purity concepts re-emerge along spatial regimes. For the German case, different use of space according individual risk perceptions take place. So next slide, please. The networks of help and support increase. So in South India, feudal relationships are revitalized because of a lack of state support. And in Germany, state-based support systems and community-based solidarity emerged, but the people at the margin lose out. Next slide, please. So the knowledge and concepts of healing disease intertwined with political and religious practices. In South India, this means the regional healing traditions are revitalized by the states and communities alike. So this is what I said before, like Siddha medicine, Unani, Ayurveda, etc., etc. At the same time, conspiracy theories, this is the origin of the virus, lies in the West, and the West is more vulnerable to the virus, and in the end is responsible for it, emerge. In Germany, we've seen a flood on information streamed by social media, and the society is reorganized along ideas of individual versus public autonomy, responsibility, and rights. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, dear Professor, for your presentation.
You're welcome.
He presented a very interesting research with clearly defined, as far as I can say, research strands on space and materiality, networks and relationships, knowledge formation, and the coping strategy, and then the side effects of pandemic, and very interesting results. So I think we will have a lot to ask at the end. First, we will listen to our next speaker, Associate Professor Sorin Kostege, University of Bucharest, and his subject is the pandemic of fake news. The floor is yours, Sorin.
Thank you very much, Dimitrios. In a sense, it's a wonderful continuation of the presented project. Here, let's make some disclaimers. I'm not going to present any project. I'm going just to launch an idea, in a sense to test it with you. And I will focus mainly on what can we do in order to deal better with fake news. We as academics, I mean. Because I'm taking very seriously the civics engagement for society. So I think we as academics, we should respond, and I see fake news as a social virus, and I'm going to explain very soon why and how. So that's the structure of my talk. Another disclaimer, I asked Dimitrios yesterday how much time I have, and he said 20-25 minutes, so I designed my talk for 20-25 minutes. I'll try to be as quick as possible. Well,
take your time.
Yes. Since I think we are going, all four of us, to provide food for thought, maybe we will go for over the lunch as well, right? Thank you. Okay, so I have 4 sections. What is pandemic? What is fake news? Why a pandemic of fake news? And lately, but not lastly, is what can we do? And that's my focus of my talk. Okay, so what is pandemic? That's a classical thing. I found in the Webster dictionary 2 senses. One is occurring over a wide geographic area, such as multiple countries or continents, exactly what we had in the previous talk, I mean South India and Germany, and typically affecting a significant proportion of the population. And these 2 concepts are very important, wide geographic area and significant proportion of the population. And secondly, characterized by a very widespread growth or extent. So keep that in your mind. So both senses, I think, entitle us to speak about the pandemic of fake news. I mean, not just the pandemic of COVID, but the pandemic of fake news, or better said, the info pandemic of fake news. Okay. Now, secondly, very shortly, what is a fake news? That's the most difficult question. And maybe it's very good to clarify from the very beginning what is not fake news. And here we have fake news and false news, and I'm stating from the very beginning that fake news are not just false news. It would be wonderful, it would be very easy, but they are not just false news, because in each fake news we will have a compound of truth. So it's not just falsity. So yes, this question, are fake news just false news? No. And now let me go further and analyze, I don't know if you know the concept of bullshit. I mean not the daily concept of bullshit, the philosophical concept of bullshit. That's a serious little book written by a serious philosopher, I think from Princeton, in 2012, as you can see, on bullshit. And I picked up just a quote: bullshit is a greater enemy of truth than lies are. And in this case, I think the fake news are closer to bullshit than to lies. Who is the greater bullshitter? Why? For instance, just to provide you some facts, the former President Donald Trump has said more than 10,000 false and misleading things in his first 825 days in office. So when you are the most powerful man in the world and you are just providing to the world, well, let's say fake news, then, well, we have a problem. You know the American phrase, Houston, we got a problem. Okay, so fake news are between false news and bullshit. And why bullshit is more dangerous than false news? Because in the case of bullshit, in the case of, for instance, people like former President Trump have said, they didn't care about the truth. You know, when you are stating something false, you are caring about the truth because, in a sense, you are negating the truth. When you are just bullshitting people, you don't care. You are just providing things and information in order to convince and persuade them. So the truth is no more in your attention. And that's the real danger. And I may add that the modern world is more about false information and mistruth and not so about tanks and physical armies, even though now in the north of Europe we have a real world, well, a special operation, by the way. And the modern soldier is called troll and fights on internet and Facebook and Twitter and TikTok and Instagram in order to conquer minds and influence their decisions. Well, but the heart of the attack is their hearts, because a fake news will target our emotions. So now we have this flood of information, as my colleague said, with fake news, false news, hot news, breaking news, all about just news. I don't know how is the situation in your country, but in my country, when I am looking at the TV set, I have 3 floods of information continuously. And in some televisions, it's a continuous breaking news. That's crazy. And I think that, in a sense, we have too many news and too much information. And what we need a critical filter, a rational firewall to block fake news. And here I am going to state my, well, hypothesis. We are talking about fake news in the context of COVID, right? Of this virus. Well, as I said, for me, fake news are viruses. Why? Because, as I said, they have a true part, and exactly like viruses, they are penetrating our system, and they are duplicating at a great rate in our mind. And exactly like in the case of viruses, we as agent, in this case as epistemic agent, we are just spread it to them, you know? So they are contagious. And what we need in order to block, and I'm going to elaborate that a little bit, well, as you know, we need, bless you, I hope it's not fake news. We need to cross-verify the sources and match the news with the facts, and generally to make the transition from mere information to knowledge. And knowledge means structured, articulated, and verified information. And you know that sometimes one image values 1,000 words. Well, in a nutshell, that's a fake news. Whenever you are not providing the whole picture, you can see exactly the opposite. And that's emblematic for fake news. Now, why a pandemic of fake news? Well, I'm coming, there are many, many reasons. I'm coming with just 3 of them because I'm not focusing on that, on the lack of time. The first one, I think, because the pandemic of COVID-19 inflicted all kinds of fears and distrust into truth and governmental institutions. Because of war of wars, I mean, we had the war in Syria, and we had a lot of immigration and social emotionality. And here the topic is the stranger in our society. So whenever we have immigration, that's actualized. And generally speaking, because we are in the post-truth society, where science and truth are not anymore in the center of our lives and discussions. As I said, when you are bullshitting people, it's not just lie. You are not caring about truth. Okay, and now I think that's the most substantial part of my talk. What can we do, right? That's the context. And what can we do, we as academics? I think we can get back to critical thinking, to rationality, and to logic, and we need to pursue the truth, and we need to dismake fake news. Okay, you will say, but how? Well, as I said, let's get back to critical thinking, but let me elaborate very shortly what do I understand by critical thinking. So what is critical thinking? Well, I think at least 3 things. One, it's a well-established academic discipline. You have courses, you have textbooks, you have professional associations, meetings, conferences like that, and all kinds of things. In my case, this is not what I have in mind when I'm speaking about critical thinking. Of course, it's important. It's crucial for me. I'm a professor of critical thinking. I'm coming from philosophy. But is not what I have in mind here. Secondly, it's a kind of cognitive skill. And for instance, when the European Commission is saying that the future belongs to our students and we have to inflict and train them different skills, well, critical thinking is one of the most wanted. But this is not what I have in mind, and well, the definition of that would be, better said, the understanding of this cognitive skill would be to be more rational, logical, scientific, analytical, articulated, clear, concise, argumentative, well, reflexive thinking. But what I have in mind, it's a kind of mental attitude or stance. And what does it mean, critical thinking, as a mental attitude? Well, I think it presupposes 2 things. One, it's a kind of scientific skepticism. What would be this scientific skepticism? Well, a critical inquiry into facts, an evidence-based investigation in order to pursue the truth, to test hypotheses, to verify suppositions, to be logical and rational, to recognize your errors and mistakes, to be able to change your opinions and beliefs in the face of evidence and better counter-arguments. I think the last thing is crucial. And secondly, it presupposes or assumes a kind of intellectual humility. We are here in the land of Socrates, so where it would be better to talk about that than here. And what does it mean? Well, it means the capacity and disposition to know the boundaries of your expertise, to recognize the limits of your knowledge and epistemic competence, the power to say no, and not to venture to believe something quickly and without verifying its sources. We are all falling daily in these traps. So, critical thinking as a mental attitude presupposes a logical and rational thinking based on a solid scientific skepticism and a constant epistemic humility. And I think that will lead to efficient detection of fallacies and help us choose rationally. And, well, we have all kinds of traps. They are called logical fallacies. There are hundreds. And that's a very interesting side. But I'm not going to elaborate them. I'm just going to mention them. Now, going to the end, I'm going to connect critical thinking and emotion intelligence. Because from my perspective, I think they are two sides of the same coin. And somehow we are in a vicious circle. So in order to be to manage better our emotions, we have to be rational. But in order to be rational, you have to better manage your emotions. So we have to look at them together. And in a sense, more or less is exactly as in the case of fake news, conspiracy theories, and COVID. I mean the pandemic of COVID, because they both boost each other. I mean, the trusting in conspiracy theories and fake news made people not fight correctly with the pandemic of COVID, and that will fuel further the fake news and the conspiracy theories. So we are trapped in a vicious circle. This one, it's a kind of mental one. How can we break it? Well, I'm pretty sure that you may know this wonderful author and book, Fast Thinking and Slow Thinking by Daniel Kahneman. And basically, he won a Nobel Prize in economics in 2002 for providing us that our mind it's under the control of two competing thinking systems. One, it's the fast thinking system, which is instinctive, intuitive, and emotional. And the second one is slow thinking, which is deliberative, logical, and rational. Well, in philosophy, everything was said from the very beginning. In a sense, and Plato didn't get the Nobel for that, but said that more than 2,500 years ago, you can find this chariot allegory in Phaedrus, and he said that our mind is conducted by two winged horses, a black one and a white one, symbolizing rationality and emotivity. And basically, that's it. And the whole thing is to make the two horses to go together in the direction you wanted. Well, we have also in philosophy Descartes, which in the 17th century came with this mind-body dualism. And he stated that there are two separate realms, is res cogitas realms and res extensa realms. The danger of this idea, and we have in our society this perspective, and is this that we are seeing now rationality and emotivity totally disconnected. They belong to two separate reals, which is not true, because we have, thanks God, neuroscience, and we have Damasio, which is a very important author in neuroscience, and the name of the book is exactly Descartes' error, and he showed us, I mean scientifically, that we are not trapped in this false dilemma. I mean, being either rationally or emotionally. Why? Because simply we are a mixture of the two, and we can escape of this mixture. I mean, in a sense, the most irrational thing on earth would be to say that we are totally rational. So, our rationality is intimately connected and intertwined with our emotivity. And when we want to rationally establish the truth, we may come upon an emotional mistruth. And well-known start of our daily life, well, the fake news. And well, here there are things how to fight about fake news. In our case, I will pursue further what would be our academic response to it. recall this image. And what's important here is to provide the whole truth. Because if you are getting only a fragment, it's still the truth, but in the context, it's have exactly the reverse meaning of it. So, one thing would be to get the whole true picture of the facts. That means to get back to truth. And further, you know, truth, nothing but the truth. Well, nothing but the truth would be just truth. And people will say that means back to science. But just truth and just science are enough for us. And we have for years, you know, this need for STEAM. You know, science, technology, what is E coming from? Engineering, yes, and mathematics. I would say emotion, but no. Okay, but what we need here is just STEAM. I would say that's a just fallacy. Why? Well, because we have not to forget the role of humanities and social sciences. In what sense? Well, in the sense that in contrast with the exact sciences, which give us some slices of the world, humanities focus on the broad, big, whole picture. That's our task. I mean, in physics, we are cutting down the universe and looking at it depending on what kind of particles we will want to discover. In chemistry, it's the same, biology is the same. I'm not saying they are not important, but they are slices of the world, and we need the whole picture. So, what we have here, we have a fragmentary versus holistic knowledge. Now, methodologically, exact sciences are based on empirical inquiry, whereas humanities, and here, of course, social sciences, focus more on speculative reasoning. And so we have a second dichotomy, empirical versus imaginative thinking. Also, in exact sciences, scholars verify facts and test hypotheses, yet in humanities and social sciences, sorry, I forgot to mention that both, we interpret facts and make imagination experiments. So I would say that the general dictum for exact science, what cannot be measured and falsified, it does not exist. Well, try to measure false news, fake news, love, God, and many other aspects of our life, and see what happens. And the general rule for humanities and social sciences, I think, is to embody and live the virtues, values, and principles, and to deal and fight for. So we have a third differences, namely quantitative versus qualitative reason. So, why we need humanities and social sciences together with STEM? Because only like that we'll have the whole picture, namely we'll have both fragmentary and holistic knowledge, we'll have both empirical and imaginative thinking, and we have both quantitative versus qualitative reasoning. And I would say the rational conclusion is we need both, and we need not just the truth, but the whole truth. And we need to be humans again, and I think it's a crucial time after the pandemic and now during the crisis of the war to show humanity, to recognize and value our humanity, and to deal rationally and critically with our emotions. And as I said, the most irrational thing is to say that we could be purely rational, and the most unscientific way to deal with the modern world would be to exclude humanitas and to go only for the STEM. So aim for the whole truth. And these are the concluding remarks. The most irrational thing is to think that we are totally rational. We should combine critical thinking with emotional intelligence. We should be skeptical but not cynical. we should be modest but not humble. We get smarter, we should understand how to get stupid. Politicians do not speak the truth, but the truth must be speak to them, and truth must be taken holistically. I didn't have time to elaborate, I'm just mentioning them. So the main idea would be aim for the whole truth and be aware of fake news, because they are viruses which are penetrating our epistemic system, exactly like in the case of a computer with the other viruses, because we have this epistemic firewall, the rational one, but when we are in an emotional stance, we are easy penetrated. Σας ευχαριστώ.
Thank you very much, Sorin, for your lecture. Sorin took up many things, and I'm sure that at the end they will give basis for hot discussion: fake news, false news, how to dismiss fake news, critical thinking, emotional intelligence, and all this, humanities and empirical sciences. And his concluding remark: aim is the whole truth, but how to get there. So, thank you very much. Let's go on now with our third speaker, Professor George Plios from our university. The floor is yours, Professor. And the subject is fake news versus academic reality.
Hello, good morning, everybody. Mr. Vice Rector, thank you very much for the invitation, or the organizers for the invitation to be with you and present my presentation. Also, I'm going to speak about fake news, like a colleague from Romania and the University of Bucharest. Before I start, I'd like to make a remark and state, a remark. It's funny, but we're universities from 10 universities from 6 countries, right? We speak English, but no one of these countries is an English-speaking country. Okay, I don't know if this is good or bad, but it's a fact. Okay, so I'm going to speak about fake news. I'm going to speak about fake news, not in general. Also, exactly 1 year ago, I published a book, 500 pages, about fake news, about the epistemology, sociology, and typology of fake news. And later on, we published, me and my co-associates, a book about media and the pandemic. This is the first time I'll try to connect my view about fake news and education, which is our common field, right? This is my first attempt. Well, this is an overview of my presentation today. First, I'm going to speak about fake news in general, what is fake news in my understanding. Second, which option of higher education, mostly higher education, can be faked. And third, which factors favor or facilitate the flourishing of fake news as a phenomenon? Because we had all the time in the past fake news since the beginning of the mass media. But in our time, fake news becomes a phenomenon, a communication and social phenomenon. And there's a why for this. This does not happen just like this, for nothing. There's a reason for that, or a series of reasons. And of course, I'll conclude with the question, what can I do? What can we do? Well, let me explain what I understand by the term fake news. I fully agree with a colleague from Romania that fake news is not just lies. fake news is a distortion of facts. But there are many kinds or forms of distortion of facts. I distinguish two main forms of distortion of facts. First, the absolute form of distortion, which is lies. And what is lie in the news story, which news story is lieful news story, is that news story where the fact did not happen, or the person who the journalists blame did not commit this fact. That's a lie, a lieful news story. And a relative form of distortion or distorting facts, this is the fake news. Distorted news content. Fake news is this kind of news stories which are distorted to some extent or in various forms. And in my analysis, I see that there are more than 130 million ways or forms to distort the facts. It's not that simple issue, fake news. 130 million ways or forms of distorting the facts. So there are reasons why a possibility can become a reality, like fake news today. Another option of the same question is where do fake news come from? Some say that some authors say that fake news is a kind of violation of the logic of the news or news stories. That's not truth. Fake news comes deep from the structure of news as discourse. Please imagine, what is news? News is not science. Robert Pack has said that. Fake news is not literature, for example. It's not fiction. Fake news is a mixture of fact and fiction. So, a news story contains two things, facts and views. And there are two ways to combine facts with views. The first one is the journalist to describe facts from a point of view, a certain point of view. Let us say ideology. This is the normality in journalism. Right? To explain, for example, what is going on, what happens from the point of view of one or another ideology. This is normality. And there is another form to combine views, facts and views. To use the facts just to project our views. That's propaganda. We use the facts not for the sake of the facts, but of the sake of our views, of our ideology. And that's propaganda. So in this form of combining views, facts and views, we can distort. And very often, the producers of news distort the facts and they produce fake news. But what I want to underline is that there is not a sharp distinction between lies and fake news. The difference is a kind of extent, of degree. The more we distort the facts, the more we approach the lies. So there is not a sharp distinction between facts, between fake news and lies. This is something relative. And notice that when a fact in a certain era we consider as truth, as a fact, for example, in another era we think that it's a lie. Like, for example, our views for the planet system. Okay, what they believe in the past, for us, is a lie. But there was not fake news. However, these are the two. So, what I'm trying to say is that fake news is tightly connected to propaganda. The producer of fake news, they use fake news just to do propaganda for various reasons. For political propaganda, commercial propaganda, advertisement, or other things. Religious propaganda, etc. Now, I can speak long about fake news for the epistemology of fake news. And now let me come to the sociology of fake news. Of course, I'll examine this issue later. If we now try to apply this view regarding education, which options of higher education are being faked? In my understanding, there are mostly 4 options or aspects of education, higher education, which can be faked. Let me explain first that I make this conclusion starting from the point of view that education today is a commodity. And it is not my idea. This is the idea of the whole society, of the ruling ideas. And if we consider education as a commodity, there are 4 main values in this commodity. First, its symbolic value, the symbolic value of the specialty, of the school or the department, the type of education, public or private, the country of origin of certain organization, educational organization, etc. Second, the quality of education is an issue of distortion in the news story. This relates to the use value of the commodity knowledge or education. The third option, which very often is a subject matter of violation of the logic of things, is the labor market, which is the exchange value of education. Since I have a diploma, what could be my career, for example? What will be my job? What will be my income, etc., etc. This is the exchange value of education. It's a commodity. And the last option of education, which can be faked, is the funding, the ways of funding, or the ownership of institutions, education institutions, or universities. That's the value, the pure value, the very essence where we speak about truth regarding higher education. Who owns the university? That defines for what reason. Of course, this approach does not apply to the same extent or the same type of fake news in all countries, and all times, etc., etc. And of course, we must be attention to the dialectics between public and private institutions. Now, let me now show some examples of fake news regarding this option I referred, I mentioned. Unfortunately, for you, unfortunately, most of the cases will be from our experience, the Greek experience. 3 or 4 years ago, there was a case here in Greece of a Greek student, I can say her name, Eleni Antoniadou, who claimed that she was working for NASA, and she was taking part in the training of cosmonauts. And before that she was a member of the team that invented the artificial trachea in the United States. And there was a lot of publication here in Greece about this fact. Interviews, reports, stories, news stories on television, etc., etc. And that was a lie. That was a student, like every other student, any other student, went to the States for a master's degree and nothing more. She never took part in the team which actually invented the artificial trachea. It's a very bitter story, among others. The story about the artificial trachea. And she never trained no one astronaut. But the media here paid a lot of attention to this story that was fake news. Why? Because NASA is something very high. The States have the better universities in the world. The American universities, NASA, have a very high symbolic value. That's why. Let me now give you another example regarding how one can distort the facts regarding the social status or the symbolic value of universities. This is a news story from a website, news website here in Greece. You can read what they say, that foreign students do not prefer our universities. The journalist knows, or she should know, that education, higher education in Greece is not like in the other countries. It's not possible for a student to choose to come here to study unless he is studied by his country, for example. Okay? It's not that easy like in UK, United States, or other countries. That's why it's structural. In a structural way, it's not possible. Not because foreign students do not prefer our universities. And let me say from my own experience, I'm director of an MA, English language MA, Media and Refugee Migration Studies. And we have students from 8 countries, other countries, mostly from the US, Ireland, and Germany, and Cyprus, and Italy, and France, and other countries. Because this is possible. For the MA programs, it's possible. Also, we meet a lot of obstacles. They meet obstacles, have obstacles for recognition of the degrees from the countries they come, for example. Okay. Advertising is a means to create the symbolic value. It's not the only, but it's a very important means to create symbolic value of an institution. Now you see here what a Greek minister said 2 or 3 years ago. She's still minister of the development. BCA College is a private college, not university. This starts the new academic year in a new wonderful building on Alexandra's Avenue, it's close here. A real jewelry. Good luck in a college that ensures work in every graduate, and upgrades studies in Greece. That's a statement of a Greek minister. What he's doing, advertisement of a private institution, which is not university actually. That creates symbolic value. And now, let me I go to the second option of education, higher education, which can be distorted. This is the quality of education. I read again what Minister Georgiadis said. Your diploma, he said to the students of a foreign private but not university institution, is not only equal, but even better comparing to the diploma of your colleagues from the Greek public universities. And notice that our university is among the 1.4 best universities in the world. It's a position 200. Sorry, 200,
around 200,
250, something like that. And the minister says that that private institution, which is not even a university, is better than our university, which among the best in the world. I mean, it's 200. That's a way to promote the quality of studies in a private institution, which is high or trying to have high symbolic value. This story was reproduced. The point here is not what the minister said. The point here is that a large part of the media are reproduced in a positive way or in a neutral way this statement. What happened here now? Sorry. Okay, that's. I'm going now to the third point, the third option of the higher education, which can be distorted, which can be faked. Labor market. What a student can do having a diploma. What is the exchange value of his diploma, of the study, of the university actually. I already told you that not the quality of the studies, but what the market or the political authorities recognize as the value of the studies. Not the scientific value of studies, but the market value of studies, or the political value of studies. It's what is something that can define the exchange value of a diploma. And I can describe you a lot of stories from the States where the authorities there closed universities which cannot be, which were not recognized by the market. And when 2001 star and 1911 star happened, they did not have specialists in the Middle East or the Islamic studies. Funding, the core aspect of the distorting, as I already told you. In our university, we have an undergraduate English language program, right? The students pay. What they say here, that this is the first program the Greek students pay. No, this is not true. The foreign students pay, not the Greeks. What we can see here, that this part of the media wish we to introduce fees in Greece. That's what they will. And very shortly, which are the factors which facilitate the flourishing of fake news as a phenomenon? Because it's a large phenomenon. 5 things. The medium, the crisis of ideology, the political polarization in the country or any country, commodification, and the change of news narratives. Very shortly, the medium. Have you met this? Have you seen that? Before, Internet is full of this, of publication of this sort. You can buy a fake diploma. In the past, when we had only the old media, radio and television, no matter public or private or commercial, it was impossible to see such a publication or an ad. It was just impossible. Today it's possible. Why? Because of the internet. Internet democratizing, let us say, fake news. The internet contribute to the socialization of fake news. In the past, only few had the privilege to spread fake news. Today, almost everyone has that possibility. And it's a part which refers to the university, our university. This is a real threat. And I'll show later, in the last. And this is a diploma we can get. I was working in the past in the Greek Narek, and we had students coming from the UK, bring us diplomas. First time we met a diploma for which university, I don't remember now. So we asked our embassy in London to search about this institution. They went in the suburbs of London, the third floor, a closed apartment, no one is here. There's no university, there's no institution, there's no nothing. It was totally fake. Diploma. The crisis of ideology is another factor that facilitates the flourishing of fake news regarding education. We see that in the case of China. How China decided to ideologize higher institution or institution in general. We see, for example, a study in Guatemala. Our colleagues in Guatemala found that through the left-wing government stress on issues of inequality, for example, welfare issues, etc., but regarding the rest aspects of the higher education, the left-wing government followed the same line like the right-wing government. No ideology. No ideology. Here is from Greece. Today and yesterday here in Greece we had student elections. Students voting for in order to elect the unions, the member of the unions. I mean, yeah, the council of the unions. And there are voices who ask to ban unions, student unions from the university. Voices on the side of journalists, of journalism, mostly lifestyle media, and of course of conservative government. They fight to each other. We must ban the unions. The reality is here. We cannot ban the unions because there are not unions anymore. They are dead. Their existence is just a fiction, not a reality like 30 or 40 years ago. Political polarization, and I'm going to the end. The governments use the media in order to do propaganda and promote educational reforms. For example, the Labour Party in the UK organized such a campaign in order to promote the 3 Rs: rhetoric, repetition, rebuttal. Same or similar in the UK. The US government paid $186,000 American dollars to a public relations firm in order to produce favorable news on the President Bush education policy, etc. Let me give you an example from Greece. 2 years ago, the Greek Prime Minister argued in an interview that in order to, in other countries, not all young people go to the university, but almost 50% of them are oriented towards technical education. What he said literally: excellent student is the one who overcomes, who learns to handle adversity, who gives to the maximum of his own potential. Not all students can get the highest score. We are not all the same. We are not all equal. We are never going to be all the same, but the logic is I try, I struggle, I work, I hard. This statement was changed and what was published on the side of a lot of media. We cannot all go to university because we are not equal. And that happened because of the political confrontation, of party antagonism, of political polarization. The media changed the meaning of his statement. And the media. And of course, commodifications. Here I have some cases of what happened because of commodification. Look what, for example, Rolling Stone, the magazine Rolling Stone wrote about an incident happened in the US. Describe a rape in Duke University. It was totally lie. Another case. Here. Sorry. The developers, some developers of content in various programs, undergraduate programs, for example, do not know that there is no liberal party, the UK, that exists only the Labour Party. But what they say, why the developer said liberal and not Labour, because it was on the internet. And now, the last factor. The change of narratives, news narratives. And you see here a kind of different news narratives, how they describe about, how they speak about higher education, for example. Can we somehow deal with it, the situation, I mean? Somehow, believe me. We should not have great expectations. Must be realistic. We have only two weapons. The first weapon is technological solutions. For example, various programs which detect fake news, etc., or even hardware, software or hardware, okay. Fact-checking and verification, okay. But look, why people believe to fake news? Because they are addressed, fake news is addressed to their stereotypes and prejudices. That's why fake news exists, because stereotypes and prejudices exist. And these kind of news stories reproduce our prejudices. What for one is truth, for another one is a lie. And this is because of our prejudices and stereotypes. That's why. And it's very difficult to fight using only technical means. Where, of course, can use social means. For example, media literacy and critical thinking. We punish critical thinking today. Why? We are other directed. Who direct us? The market, the government, international organizations, etc., etc. We punish critical thinking because of neoliberalism and technological determinism. If we want to speak about critical thinking, we must fight neoliberalism and positivism. That's what I want to say, and of course, social inequality. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Plios, dear George. It was about fake news from the point of view of journalism and in relation to education. And now, directly to our last speaker for the day, Professor Alcantara. His subject is fake news and digital media. What we all can learn from it. The floor is yours, Professor.
Thank you for having me here today. I'll keep it short because it's very late. You should be worried because you know what happens when the presenter says, I will keep it short, but I'll keep my word this time. So one thing, thank you. the start. I like a lot that we are from very different, not from very different, but from different fields. So, and I will give you a slightly different perspective on the fake news. I'm a linguist myself, with a background on critical discourse studies. I'm listening to me twice. Yes. Here. And I'm part of a research team, World Lab, in Madrid, where we research political and social discourses in digital environments. Basically, toxic discourses like hate speech and disinformation. And we are lately giving a great importance to emotions, so I think there will be some overlapping. No, not yet. Well, while I was listening to my colleagues, I was wondering if we as academics think that we are immune to fake news. But myself, personally, I think I have a lot of beliefs which are based on fake news. I'm sure that I have them. In fact, I would like to focus my part of the panel on 3 simple ideas. And the first one is that fake news are very natural, a natural thing to have. And therefore, they can be explained by how human beings are. And finally, that we have an opportunity at our universities to fight against them. So I will take up the challenge presented by Sorin Costelli, and let's see where we get. So I research on digital communication, as I just said, but fake news, like many other phenomena found in the digital media, are not something completely new. And they are not artificial either. Fake news can be dangerous, but they have always been part of us as a society. Rumors and myths have been, are, and will be key elements of our societies. Priester Lash just talked about myths related to the pandemic. And we love rumors, pieces of information that might not be true, but they are nevertheless interesting and exciting, like in the picture. We have lived for many centuries in societies that depended on people passing on information in very informal ways and without fact-checking, obviously. So many features of fake news in digital media are all friends. For example, information evoking an emotional response has more success in the social media, but it was always the case in the traditional media too. So we love emotional information, and frequently we don't really care of its truth value. We humans have always loved a great story. We love novels, we love movies, and we know that they are fiction, but we learn a lot from them, and we don't care if they are true or not. So what is new in the digital world, and what can we all learn from it? I think the novelty lies in its intensity, and it can help us to learn things more about ourselves than about the machines. I don't know if it's okay. Yes. I don't know. Yeah. Let me give you an example. Fake news spread 70% faster than real news in the digital media, in the social media. And there are 2 main reasons. I already mentioned the first one. Emotional information is more interesting. Usually real news are not that emotional. Besides, negative news get our attention more than the positive ones. It's something interesting that we could say that we are optimistic by design somehow. And we expect good news by default. So in comparison, good news are non-news. Digital media have sped up our lives. We were talking about the flood of information, and we are exposed to so much data that we are using our strategies for sifting for relevant information at full speed. We don't have time to invest in deep considerations, of course, but we cannot help to pay attention to messages that evoke negative emotions, that are like alerts for us. In research on fake news, we have a concept called the continued influence effect, which means that it is extremely difficult to change the beliefs acquired from misinformation. Again, gossips and fake news have always been quite sticky. And you know it, when there is smoke, there is a fire, no? We say. And even when we have clear proofs that there is not, and there are many reasons for this. The main one, however, yes, the main one probably is that our minds are in fact writing the reality. So our minds give sense to a fragmentary reality by constructing narratives. Fake news are also bricks in these constructions as the rest of inputs that we receive. And it is not easy to remove a brick from a construction, even when you know that the brick is fragile, because other bricks depend on it. We construct narratives in our heads, and that's why we love stories. And as I have already said, we don't have much time, so we love stories that are easy to understand, that sound coherent with our worldview, and that are consistent with other facts that we know to be true. Digital media is a great space for sharing stories, of course. And it does not have gatekeepers, so our minds, our critical thinking, is the only filter that there is. If a story or a piece of information sounds plausible and it is easy to digest, we will incorporate it to our narratives. Not doing it would mean a lot of effort and time that we don't have. Repeated exposure to a message is a key factor mentioned in all the studies on fake news. Do you know a better means than WhatsApp or Twitter to repeat a message many times? We accept as true the ideas that we hear many times. Again, there is a smoke. It can even be interpreted as social consensus when it seems that everybody is saying the same thing. Repetition is so dangerous that we should be careful repeating fake news, even to state that they are false. So, what can we all learn from it? In the first place, that digital media fit our natural tendency to filter information with emotional shortcuts. Our biology is not prepared for this digital environment. In fact, if you think about it, human beings have lived in small groups of intimates for most of our history. So it's normal that we are very good at taking decisions in those environments and not that good in the fast-paced, complex digital space. We have this limitation, and maybe that's the first thing we should be aware of. We are potential victims of fake news. In other words, the expected outcome of an exposure to fake news is that we take the bait. Don't trust yourself too much in this, because you are not designed to be successful in the task. Regulation of fake news can lead to restricted freedom of speech, and that is why we have to stay alert. That is also why at our universities we should educate our students in being skeptical with critical thinking, especially in how good they are filtering the fake news. Everything could be fake if you don't check it. And we should take the following thing into account. To rely in misinformation is not the same as being ignorant. Usually, you do not support a cause because you ignore things, but because you react to information that you think that is true. Conviction does not emerge from ignorance. I've said that fake news are sticky because they become part of larger narratives. If we want to fight against fake news in our universities, we have to start by creating alternative narratives that fit with the true information. It is not enough to claim that some information is false, because it may leave us with an informative gap and with a narrative that makes no sense, a wall without a brick. We have to provide alternative stories. And these stories, and I think that's a quite important point, must be respectful with those who believe in fake news. As we have seen, they are only behaving in a very human way. Vaccines could be made by Bill Gates in order to control us, or Obama could have been born in Africa, and Russia could only seek to fight Nazism in Ukraine, and so on. It depends on the larger picture that we have constructed in our minds. Nobody reacts, and keep in mind that nobody reacts in a positive way to an attack. We must attack fake news, not their victims. Let's help them to question the source of the information. Let's give them an explanation from a space where they can feel safe, with empathy and non-judgment. I think that digital media can be a good place to start with the students and also with academics, but we must be aware of the limitations. Do we want to provide with truthful information? We have to do it right. First, we should keep it as simple as possible, because we don't have time for deep considerations. Second, we have to try to understand the narrative that is making sense in the other side. Be empathic somehow with the other narrative. And finally, give a background to fill in the gaps left by removing the misinformation. So, to finish up, and I'm being short, I think, let me tell you that as civic universities here in Civis, we have work to do in relation with fake news. That's quite clear in this panel. And as we are seeing also, we already know enough to do it right, I think. So, thank you.
Professor Alcantara, before you leave,
Yes.
You leave the floor, let me announce that we have asked the technical assistants for their support to prolong this meeting a bit. So we don't finish at 1. We have some time later after that. So if you would like to add something, because I felt that you were under great pressure, if you would like to add something to what you said, please take a few minutes.
Thank you. But I think I prefer if we answer or if we let the audience to take part on the discussion, because I think there are so many ideas that it could be interesting to hear from you. Thank you. Anyway.
Thank you very much. So now to questions, please. Please, yeah. Please, could you also say your name and?
Yeah. So if I speak like this, you can all hear me.
I think there are microphones.
Thank you. So I'm Max Brouwer from Aix-Marseille University. So I would like to trail back because we had a lot of information, a lot of different perspectives. Thank you for all your lectures on these topics. But I feel there's a dimension that today is capital in the understanding of fake news and its propagation that has been missed on a bit, and that's what partially also explains why during COVID there was such an explosion on fake news. I find it first quite ironic that the word we're referring to today was popularized greatly by the bullshitter-in-chief, Donald Trump, because fake news started to appear violently around 2016, and I question highly if it's an appropriate word to study the bullshit that is being spread today and the distortion of facts, because more frequently today I find people that do not even question fake news, because effectively that's a discourse of media, but they question facts. People tell me I do no longer believe in facts, and that's something that's horrible. Which brings me to the next topic. It's big data and it's algorithms, and I'm speaking of the platforms, because effectively human beings have flaws. We react to emotional stimuli, and we would better understood this than Facebook, Instagram, Google, YouTube. All these media are using these flaws to give us more products to consume and to stay on their platforms for longer so they can advertise, so they can keep us there. So much more than ideology, I think it's mostly to get our attention, because all these media are competing with each other to grab our attention currently. So my question brings us there to this question of big data and what we can do with this question, because I have the feeling that, well, in a university we're quite privileged. We are the 0.5% of the people that get to be in an environment that's highly stimulating, with people with different opinions that want to, or that try to get to critical thinking, even if we're not exempt from all these biases. But 99% of the people, they get information from YouTube, they get information from Google, they get information from these platforms that are trying to sell us, that are trying to buy our attention. My question truly is how are we, as a collective society, going to respond to all these mechanics of big data? How are we going to battle and manage this issue that is in front of us? and keep going on in terms of critical thinking with big data. Because currently, and I like this metaphor a lot, and I'll finish on that one so the others can react. I have the feeling that we are all going to the same supermarket, but depending on the person that is standing in the supermarket, there's either only Red Bull in the entire supermarket, or there's only broccoli in the entire supermarket. So when we're discussing, we're no longer looking at the same reality. We're no observing the same facts. We are no longer discussing the same subjects. Thank you.
Thank you too. Okay, let's please, Sorin, start.
I will start just because he mentioned at the end reality. And you are taking as a fact, as it being there. Reality, and in philosophy we have many theories and discussions about that, is not just something which is there, but it's something which is created by your mind when your mind encounters a context or a medium, right? So your metaphor in the grocery shop, it's excellent, because we are seeing and grabbing from reality what we are throwing and searching for, you know? I mean, we have like a conceptual network. We are throwing over the world, and we are gathering information according to what we are looking for. So that's one thing. Now, yes, it's an explosion of information. It's an explosion of big data. But exactly like in the case of viruses, I mean, regardless of the number of them, whether it's one or it's 1,000, what it's important is to have a very efficient immune system. In our case, the immune system is to be as rational, as logical, as scientific, as analytical, as reflexive as you can. As my colleague explained at the end, we are truly more penetrated by emotional and negative things, right? So in a sense, it's ironical. If you are going to your grocery shop and you are seeing something like that, buy, what was your broccoli, and the other one? Red Bull.
But that's any example, you can take anything?
Yes, Red Bull. Buy Red Bull. You are not going to buy it as much as if there would be something confusing about it, like don't buy Red Bull. And this is normal because we have to adapt, and this is Darwin. And we are paying more attention to negative emotions than to positive feelings. So pay attention at these things, and I don't think that big data per se it's a problem, but yes, in this context of information it's a problem, because how were we in the 70s, 80s, in the morning with a coffee, newspaper, maybe a TV set somewhere in the backward of our room, maybe a radio. What's going now? You have huge channels of being literally bombarded by information, right? I mean, if I'm opening only the TV or the radio or the computer or just my phone, I am shocked of how many information we will get there. Sometimes confusing information. But what is most important is the immune system, the epistemic immune system, right? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Do you think that would you like to react to this question? Something to say something? No. Okay. Yes, please. Okay.
Thank you. In my understanding, first of all, what is Red Bull? I'm joking. We don't have Red Bull anymore in Greece. It failed in commercial terms. And also, also McDonald's failed in commercial terms in Greece. It's like, okay? You see, reality is much more complex. However, The big data raises one of the most important problems in what we call information society. What is the problem? The difference between information and knowledge. Knowledge is a structured information which copes with the reality. Information does not follow that line. It can be anything. If we want to organize the data, we need knowledge, but doesn't mean to somehow abstract from the information. This is, I mean, big data contains a contradiction. On one hand, we need data, or on the other hand, we have to throw a lot of data in order to achieve. Okay, that's a very important problem. But we need knowledge, not just information. I don't want to say something about reality, one more thing I'm finishing. Imagine why fake news is so popular. Think that a kind of information, a piece of information, before to be fake news, first of all, has to be news. Otherwise, cannot be true, or lie, or fake, or what else, a news story, right? And why it happens today? Because nowadays societies are not just information societies. They are news societies. Imagine that the vast majority of the information we consume today is news. That was not the case 40, 50 years ago. The vast majority of the information that people used to consume was movies, series, music, etc., means fiction. Today we consume mostly news. That's why who wants to do propaganda choose that form of information, fake news. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Please, the lady.
I want to add something.
No, sorry. Yes.
Thank you very much. I want to go back to this supermarket metaphor and to the difference of information and knowledge. And actually, I think the supermarket metaphor is a very good example because from my perspective, big data has the problem of interpretation. So how can we interpret this flood of information we are getting? And when you're looking at a supermarket in Athens and there's no Red Bull available, which is great, big data would tell us, okay, the numbers aren't right. It's just not, we're just not selling enough Red Bull to have it in the supermarket anymore. But when we are looking at something I would call deep or thick data, we would ask, why aren't people in Greece not buying Red Bull? And so we can complement the information with some kind of a deeper knowledge, and then we can understand what was going on and why Red Bull was failing in Greece. And I think this is one of the big problems of big data, that there's no thick data to it and we can't interpret it right. So, yeah, thank you. Okay, we're all going to jump on it.
Yeah, I agree with you that the companies are very good at attacking our flaws. That's maybe all the companies. If you look at the advertisement, they are very good at attacking our flaws. And I have the feeling that we have a problem of pride in our society somehow. So, and that was the reason of my talk. I think we should teach our societies that we are not as clever as we think that we are, because we think that we don't need experts on anything because we understand things, and you can check your Twitter or whatever, and you know about anything. And if the people know that they are in danger somehow, that they can be lied by companies and by politicians or whatever, I think maybe we will go back to to trust on experts and to have more critical thinking, and that's the only solution that I can think of. But it's very complex because there is also a great inequality of power because of the information that they have between Google and company and the society or normal people. No? So it's hard. But thank you for the question. Very interesting.
Okay, thank you.
May I?
The lady who is there,
Yeah,
wait.
okay, great. So I am Tabia Seifert, a student of Sapienza University of Rome. Now, all what you've said is very interesting also because last night a few of the students with some faculty staff from Tübingen and from Greece actually, and from Glasgow, we had a very interesting conversation with a debate. It was a political debate actually. It was about the politics that we've got in the Balkan countries. It was about China and the war in Ukraine. And so what we were debating about was the politics that had to be done. And if the masses could be convinced of the right way to go, but also about the evaluation that we're having, right? What is right? What is wrong? Is there only black and white? And so on. And I feel like very, very often we live in this academic bubble, right? We've just been doing the same thing. We had this very, very interesting panel where you gave all these very, very interesting talks, I have to say, very enriching, obviously. But again, it's us academics analyzing what is going on and why something is happening. And we're trying to understand this, which is extremely important, obviously. And we just heard that, Max, you just said that it was around 99%, he said, of the people who get the information from YouTube. So again, it's us academics in the bubble, debating all the reasons and explaining to each other how we can actually go about avoiding the fake news or how we can avoid becoming bait of the fake news, the victims of fake news, right? But it's not us academics who are the big problem here, right? Because we are the people who actually think about this and who actually want to understand what is going on. So my question is a very practical question. What do you think we can do to make other people, academics or non-academics, to reflect about all these situations more often? So that was the thing we said yesterday as well. It was my question to everyone who was on the table. Now, I will be talking to my colleagues, and I will be telling them, okay, so look at the situation from a different angle, or look at the black and the white and the gray areas as well. But those people who are the victims of fake news or who are not really interested in having a very differentiated discussion about it or thinking process, how can we get to these people breaking out of the academic bubble, and how can we get to those people who apparently are not, you know, getting there for whatever reason then without any judgment?
Okay. Very clear question and very interesting, and I think our panel is ready to react. Yes, Sorin.
Yes, very nice. I mean, both of them were very interesting questions. In a case, it's simple. What's our academic duty in this case, right? First is to teach. And to teach good quality education. And that means, regardless of what we are teaching, is the way in which we teach. And if we are teaching in a very reflexive way, well, we are inflicting of what I said, the critical thinking stance or attitude. And that's very important. And it's not something new. We are here in Athens, and we have to follow the Greek model of Socrates. I'm not kidding. You have to analyze analytically all the information and all the news, and to ask, do I get the facts? Is this real? Should I trust that? And these kind of things. I mean, use your mind. Of course, your question is how to make others use their minds. Well, in our case, I think we should get out of our ivory towers and get exactly again, as the Greek model says, to the agora, to the polis, and speak out of what we are thinking. Of course, not just opinions, but opinions based on arguments. And if our discussion is based on arguments and counter-arguments, well, that would be a rational one. And we are going to inflict the good virus of the good education on society. And in this case, it will be a battle of virus. I mean, fake news and the good education, which at good education, it's also a virus. Because if you are going to stimulate curiosity, and if you are going to stimulate paideia, in the old Greek sense, well, people will think with their own minds. And that's the most important thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Sorin. Yes, please.
Go first.
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah, just a small remark. Because I think in communication it's very important that you convey the message, so the message is conveyed by a credible voice, and I'm not sure that academics are credible voices right now for most of our societies. So it's tragic, what I know, but maybe it's not our job, or not we are not the best ones to do that part of the job. We have to research. We have to try to find how to solve it, to give answers, but maybe to communicate it. I know that we here in Civis we have this civic engagement part, which is very important, and I'm part of it, in fact. But it depends on the topic. So I think it could be even dangerous to put an academic to say something about, because it can be felt as elitism or whatever. I don't know. So that was the only thing I wanted to say.
Okay.
I just want to add two small things. First is make media competencies a compulsory school subject. Teach kids from a very early age critical thinking. I just can talk from the German perspective, the German system. I'm teaching a lot of first semesters. And it takes me like 2 to 3 semesters to get out of their heads that they are believing everything which is written down. And this is just horrible. They are so indoctrinated to believe everything which is written down in a book or on social media, wherever. And they should really learn it from a very early age, maybe from the age of 8 or 10 or whatever. Just make it a compulsory school subject. So this is what I'm asking for.
Okay. One remark on this, yes, please.
Yes, one remark. Oh yeah, put yourself about this following. Sorry, ask yourself about the following. Which contains what? Professorship contains citizenship, or vice versa? Citizenship contains professorship. That's the first question. The second question is it a personal dilemma or an institutional problem? Is the same in all countries or not? I have a colleague in the UK, it's Greek. And the leadership of the university demands professorship to contain citizenship. In other cases, this is not important. This is the case of Greece. That's why Greek professors, Greek scholars, very rich activity, not only university, but outside also. It's a political problem, it's not an academic problem.
Okay, I think we have time for 2, 3 questions. Yes, please. And then also here two hands to raise. Yeah, please.
Thank you for this. I'm Matthias Heinz from University of Salzburg. Thank you for this very enriching discussion. I think we're in a very privileged place. It has already been stated. Athens is a place where this kind of dialectical debate and Socratic questioning of truth has started. So I found very interesting what our colleague from Bucharest said about critical filters. I think that might be one of the most important roles that academic institutions might take, because the simple fact-checking doesn't seem to be enough. Also because I speak from a German-speaking perspective, fact-checking has been suspected to be ideological too. So even the fact-checkers, and it is true that depending on the stance a newspaper takes, the fact-checking will be selective. So I think that's a big problem. So we really need that immune system, and we need critical filters, and that is maybe something we could provide, simply assessing the quality of the information source, because and that would be something that you not only you have to teach to younger people, students, but also to older people. I know many old people, if it comes like it looks like the New York Times, it's the Epoch Times, which is spreading all kinds of falsehoods and conspiracy theories, conspiracy myths, but it looks the layout is like a bit like the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times. And also, I think we have to refrain from ideological selection. We could assess the quality, so we would have to state also many of us will not be so much in accordance with what Wall Street Journal writes, but we have to give it to them that they have similar quality assessment and fact-checking systems in place as maybe the New York Times or the Washington Post, which is maybe more the kind of worldview we as academics many times prefer. But we could at least say, okay, these are serious sources of information. So for a critical filter, there may be different approaches. And thus we could at least maybe in Europe be able to keep a difference between infotainment like Fox News and CNN. Unfortunately, that is going very much, and serious information outlets. So that's one thing. And just one last word about the ideological narratives. There is something in my university I was very proud of in my faculty. 3 weeks into the war, my colleagues from the Slavic Studies department were able to organize a lecture series for the whole semester on the different narratives with experts from major experts, historians from Russia, Ukraine, Central Europe, of course in Salzburg, in Austria, some places in Ukraine belong to the Habsburg Empire. It's very, very close in a way. And that was very interesting, because you could see that we are passing from the pandemic, where the precise measuring and description of nature was prioritized, to understanding where social sciences and humanities come in very much, and that was a major achievement. And of course, there are different narratives. We could not decide, but we can start to understand. So the critical filter, I think that is key.
Yeah. Okay. There is. I don't know. Is there any reaction, remark, comment on that from the panel, or no? Okay. Then we come here. First, yeah. Please. Yeah.
Okay. My name is Christine from the International Office at Tübingen University. Thank you for your very inspiring thoughts. I just have a question. If you think that our underlying perception that academia and the university is so much better in dealing with fake news and critical thought than the uneducated masses that are informing themselves on social media, if we should not also doubt our ways of inquiry, because you all have defined what false news is, what fake news is. But what is a fact? And is it a fact that women are more emotional than men, for instance? That's just a question. And then I can look into research, I can investigate that question, and I find numerous studies on that question. And then I have to decide which study am I going to believe. And in the end, I cannot do my own research all the time with all the questions that are out there. And ultimately, I also have to recognize that a lot of things that were fake news before, or that were seen as a reality, as a scientific fact, have turned out to be fake news in the end. Like the Earth is flat is fake news nowadays, right? So we are very limited in really knowing what is the difference between fact and false news. How can we get out of there? I don't see any other way than Socrates and dialogue. Knowledge is a process, and maybe we should give up on this, you know, we should be a little bit more modest about what we do at our universities, because obviously we are also tainted with ideological thought and so on.
I think that you already gave the answer to your question, but our panel still...
Yeah, thank you. Very quickly. First, I will go to Salzburg and after that to Tübingen, and try to wrap up a common response to your reactions. Are we as academics better than the others? No. This is like exactly to say that the doctors are immune to the viruses. They are not immune. They know the mechanism, but if they don't apply and if they are not reflexive and if they don't protect, they will get all the viruses, and we will get all the viruses. I mean, we don't have a magic formula. It's only one formula: think, and think of your thinking. That's metacognition. That's your immune epistemic system. And to the second one, no. I mean, the second one was, are we women more emotional than men? No. No. In a sense, you are better equipped than us to deal with emotionality. Because in our, childhood is that stupid thing, boys don't cry. Boys have to fight. Boys don't have to share emotions. So you are, from my perspective, better equipped to deal with emotionality, to understand yourself, to pay attention to emotions, which is a very rational thing.
I didn't want to put it out as fake news or something.
No, it's not fake news. Anyway, I don't like to monopolize things, but very interesting discussion. Can we spend another 2 hours?
I'm afraid not. So, yes, please.
Yeah, hello, thank you. My name is Mircea Dumitru. I am teaching logic and philosophy of language and metaphysics at the University of Bucharest, and I'm very happy to be here today with you. And thank you for the presentations, very interesting. Just a very quick remark or note on the connection between truth, lies, fake news, and bullshit. There are nuances here, and actually you touched upon those in a very nice way. A basic notion here when we make the distinction is that through fake news, actually we can convey some objective content which is true. People in the audience who are coming from Romania may recall this very nice social experiment that a journalist did some 30 years ago when he interviewed real people, including some politicians. And the way he framed, it was a man, he framed the issue was such that to convey the idea that something was done wrong by the government. The question was, do you know that the Romanian government did nothing in order to prevent that 2/3 of the water to be hydrogen and 1/3 oxygen? And almost everyone said, yes, of course, because the government is incompetent. And even a notable politician actually bought this fake news. The content was there. Water is H2O. But the pragmatic cues that the interviewer used were such that people emotionally reacted based on the theory, a false theory, that government is always incompetent. So, I mean, the truth was there, water is H2O, but the way he phrased the question imparted this view that government didn't do anything in order to prevent this. Now, when I'm faking something, I'm doing that in a willful way. When I'm faking this kind of information, I'm doing that purposefully. Or if I'm faking a Picasso, the image is there. It's only the fact that I am not Picasso, okay? So this is plagiarism for sure. It's actually something which is legally defined. But what I find, and this is a general thread in all the presentations that you gave, what I find here is that we as a social and political species are very good engineers. We do things very well, but we sort of adapt in a slower way from an ethical perspective. And what are the remedies for that, as Professor from Athens said? I mean, it's not very clear. There could be maybe technological remedies, like some technological filters in order to protect us from misinformation, from fake news, but mostly it's education, humanistic education. And I'm going to talk about that this afternoon when I'm talking about European identities and universities. And this fact that we are part of this ethical project which is unfolding, which is our history, and goes very slowly, much slower than the way we build things, could be actually a fact about our human condition, that we are better engineers than philosophers.
Thank you for your question, Professor. Yeah, please.
Yeah, I'll try to answer both questions. Let me first go back to begin. Right now, exist 400 agencies or institutions fighting fake news, fact-checking organizations, let us say. Do you see any progress? Do you see the problem to start becoming something lower, let's say, or bigger? Bigger and bigger. More organization, the problem is bigger. The problem is bigger, more organization, etc. That's very good profession, believe me. Okay, fighting fake news fighter, very good profession for some people. To your question now, fake news who refer to our field of specialty is very easy to recognize us. It's very easy to recognize this fake news, right? Chemistry, biology, etc., physics, etc., etc. The problem raises when we face information who belong to other fields, or we have not experienced. There's no empirical way to somehow verify the truth of things. And you ask about facts and fake news, right? For us, humans, facts exist only for our perception, our senses. That means that facts exist for us through our notion or through our understanding of things. We are all the time engaged to different patterns or schemas of understanding the reality, religious, metaphysical, and zodiac, for example, etc., etc. So it's impossible. Only aliens, the only creature who can face facts like facts with no mediation, that's alien. You remember the film, right? We humans cannot do this. We all the time face the facts through our perceptions. In the way they have formed of our civilization, education, etc., right? So, the problem here is not to fight our perception. The problem here is to fight the sources which define our perception. And I deeply believe that we accept fake news as truth because they respond to our prejudices, as I told you earlier. And that's come from social injustice and social antagonism and inequality and discrimination, etc., etc. Racism could not exist if we haven't racism against, for example, the blacks or anyone else, right? The first condition for any discrimination is the discrimination in the reality, and that later becomes institutional, ideological, or what else. That's the step we have to undertake, but we are not ready to undertake the step.
Okay, thank you. Now time just for a quick answer and short answer. It's okay? Then, please.
I was going to maybe not so much ask a question, but just make a comment.
Please.
And I really I love the, when we look at then, how we did things, and now how we do things. And you know, in the old days, we had newspapers, books, verified news sources, you know, television, and a little bit of a sense of credibility because facts were checked, although, you know, this is not always perfect. And I feel like now one of the biggest issues with social media is the fact that social media channels are not news channels, they're entertainment. Like TV shows, like games, they are games. They're not news sources at all. They're not verified. And I think that, you know, the issue is that now everyone has a voice. Everyone can have a platform, you know, on video, on blogs, anywhere, to disseminate information, which is not checked, which is not corroborated, etc. So this really has created this proliferation, this saturation, this overload, and then really this flat line because, you know, we are saturated. What is everyone supposed to think? So I really, really think that our colleague from Tübingen talking about education, and I think before 8 years old, I mean, I think as soon as children enter the school system, this really needs to be fundamental in our education because by the time, obviously, they get to university, it's too late. And also, you know, I'm uncomfortable with this idea that emotionality equals irrationality, and I really think emotionality needs to be really brought back into into the conversation because this is where we judge nuance. This is where we really add a plus. So for me, education from a really young age, the difference between news and entertainment, and putting those in two different categories can really help all of us, including in academia, you know, because we are obviously not immune from this, and bringing back emotional intelligence rather than seeing that as unscientific or irrational. So that would be my comment.
Okay, yes, there is still a... Please.
Yes,
And then
okay.
we have a final...
I'll try to be very quick because maybe everyone is hungry already. So I want to push the discussion into more different direction. Some of you mentioned that because I rather prefer to discuss what can be done, because this discussion can continue many hours, I guess, discussing the nature of the fake news. But if we talk about how can we fight them, some of you mentioned that the technical solution to this is detailed monitoring of educational fake news. But then I think that it would be quite hard nowadays because, so to start with, I come from a political background and we often approach different issues from more philosophical strands. So I would ask the question because we cannot avoid facing the question, what is fake news and who can determine a news as a fake news? And I think that nowadays, if we try to implement this system, it would be much more difficult because people are very sensitive on a topic regarding freedom of speech, human rights, and therefore, I think that the line between how to fight fake news and whether this becomes limiting the freedom of speech. So how do we differentiate between these two phenomena? Because I think that people are very sensitive on this topic, as I mentioned already, and it will be very, very hard to implement this solution. So I think that it would be much more effective to increase the awareness, as my colleagues already mentioned, instead of fighting it in such a technical way. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Please.
Maybe we should take...
Would you like to ask something, Dora? It's okay, it's covered. Okay, please, short.
Yeah, so our last round. So first, Vanessa, I think you misunderstood if I totally didn't say that we are going to equal rationality with emotionality. On the contrary. What I said, that we are a mixture of them, and we have to take care of both. I mean, it's an illusion to say we are either totally rational human beings or emotional human beings. That's what my idea, and we have to pay attention rationally to emotions, because this is the medium and the way in which fake news may penetrate us with negative emotions. To the other thing, I don't think that we can do anything. For instance, I'm going to give you a very short example. In our Department of Slavic Languages, there is a debate, I would say ideological, which language is closer to Ukrainian, Russian or Polish? Come on, it should be a very scientific thing. I mean, let's judge the vocabulary, let's look at the syntax, and let's see the history of the languages. But I think otherwise it will be very ideological thing, right? So just think, as I said, think with your hand. That's the most important thing I would like to transmit you. That's because ideology is everywhere. False dilemma, it's everywhere. A kind of fallacy is the authority fallacy. For instance, Einstein is against the abortion. Who cares? Einstein is authority in physics, right? But who cares about his opinions in abortion, whether they are not articulated and argumentative, right? So there are all kinds of cognitive traps we have to navigate. Belongs. Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay.
Just one sentence. Yeah. A fake news story is completely logical, rational for some people. Like, for example, the Nazi Aryan theory. Or some ideas exist here in Greece that Greeks are indigenous people. They raise here, like, for example, the Greys. Okay. The grass. No, it's completely rational. And for others, it's completely irrational. Regarding news, not science, for example, right?
It's okay. It's okay. Thank you. I think that it's time to close this interesting discussion. Just let me remind you. Just let me remind you 1 minute how this discussion started. It started with a mistake of mine when I addressed Professor Priester last with a name that was not his own. And the question is, after such a discussion, what was that? Was it false news or a fake news?
But sharing.
And I hope that Professor Priester will regard this as a false news and not as a fake one. So, thank you very much, all of you, all our professors here, and good luck to everybody. Thank you.